So this is the third training session that we're having on for Mary Magdalene advocates. And this one is going to focus on, as you can see here, what's going on, what's happened, especially since the last synod closed and we had the synod synthesis. And basically, we're looking at that so that we can look at how it's going to impact our advocacy work. Where can we leverage some of this stuff? Where can we, what talking points might be helpful? And so when we're talking to the people who will be there and other people who will be making decisions about whether to expand the lectionary or not. So that's the biggest part of what we're going to do tonight, is talk about what's happening. And then I'm going to talk about some of the things that we're going to be doing in terms of advocacy. And finally, I'm going to be, so you can think about this, one of the things I'll be asking you to do either tonight in the chat or tomorrow in an email, but to let me know one way or the other if you are willing to actually reach out to some of our, what we have at least 400 people that we can reach out to. So probably more like 200 that'll actually be very viable for us to reach out to. So I'll be asking for people who would be willing to do that. And because one of the things that we don't want to do is, force people to talk to a bishop or somebody and they don't want to, because whatever someone volunteers to do, we just want to make sure that it's actually that people will follow through. So for those who are comfortable with it, that's what we're going to be asking. Well, let's see here now. So as we know, in this synodal moment, one of our main project right now is to expand the lectionary. So we see that right now, this is another really good opportunity to raise awareness. Not many people know about this, about the women gaps in the lectionary, and to share the good news that women have been integral to shaping our Christian tradition since the very beginning. And we ought to be hearing their inspirational stories proclaimed, especially on Sunday and on holy days and weekdays as well. So we know that, just a recap, the Synod synthesis from 2023, across the world, Catholics were saying it and participants agreed and put it into the Synod synthesis. It's urgent to ensure that women can participate in decision-making processes and assume roles of responsibility in pastoral care and ministry. So we know this is like at the top of the list. And this was actually a proposal that Synod participants wrote into the Synod synthesis. And it says, we need to have a range of words, images, and narratives that draw more widely on women's experience, which is exactly why we're doing this project now. Because if there's one way that we can draw more widely on women's experience, it is the experience that we know happened with biblical women, and to make sure that they are properly covered and their stories are properly proclaimed to Catholics. But since the October meeting and the synthesis, we know there's been a huge, what we might call, reset in the process. It's not really surprising. Some people really gave it a kind of a gloomy look. I don't necessarily think that's true at all. But I think what they realized, and Cardinal Hollerich, who's sort of the president of the whole project, of the whole thing, he basically said the reason we're doing this reset, and what they're doing is they're separating some of the issues, especially controversial issues, from the actual, what does it take to actually put a synod together, make a synodal church. And so he said the reason we're doing that is because it's just way too much for us to even begin to talk about in 3 weeks, which I would totally agree. So basically, we got the news on March 14th that this whole process is going to change up a little bit. And so here are some of the biggest parts of this reset. So they made the decision that the October Synod, the one that's coming up, will focus primarily on process. How do you make a church? How do you create the canon law that will actually give more authority to lay people, who will kind of reset the whole way the whole thing works, because we can talk about this day and night, but if they don't figure out how to actually create the structure for it, it'll just, whoever comes along next can just dismantle it very easily. Then there was this decision to create 10 study groups to look at the issues, and I'm going to go through all this as we go through. So these are the issues, and many of them are kind of the controversial, thorny issues, the one where there's lots of disagreements. Those are going to be discussed by study groups outside of the synod. And their work will continue on at least until 2025. So in order to study the issues. There's also was a decision to gather input from the Bishops' Conference and the Eastern hierarchical structures to be a reference for the October meeting. And I'm going to go over what our bishops said about that. And the guiding question that they asked. So basically, instead of getting us all together again, as they had done in the past, which I think is better, they really relied on the bishops' conferences to come up with kind of a report, if you will, on how can we be a synodal church. So I'll show you who came to the U.S. conference, the U.S. group that created that report. And this consultation, however they put this final synthesis together from all those bishops' conferences, that's going to be the basis for the Instrumentum Laboris, which in a way could be bad news, but it also, I think, if you look at the people who were part of the grouping in the United States, I think we have a lot of reason for hope even then that the Instrumentum Laboris, which will come out supposedly next month, what we're going to talk about at that session. And then there was also a decision to create additional 5 working groups to address topics such as the role of bishops, decentralization in the church, how to inject synodality into the church structures, their theology, and their mission. And these are all going to be part of this discussion. At least there'll be a report on how to be a synodal church on mission. So their work, they're getting together. And by the way, we don't know who the folks are in these 10 study groups yet. We do know who's going to go to the October meeting, but we don't know who's in these 5 working groups. So, all that is very important to understand, because the Vatican isn't always so transparent, and it is good to know who's actually making this dialogue happen. But so we've got these extra 5 who's going to talk about how to be a synodal church in mission. So basically, you can think of it like this, some folks are going to be inside the Synod Hall talking about process. That's where all people like Cynthia Bailey-Mans and all the 300 and some people who are going to be there, they're going to talk about process this time, how to be a synodal church. And this is actually really important if we're going to keep going forward as a synodal church. So they're going to talk about theology, canon law, and practical ways they can implement it. And they want to know how to do that in the local church, in the national groupings of churches like, the US or the North American grouping. And then the other thing they want to talk about is the relationship of the Pope to the whole church, the episcopal collegiality and synodality. So again, this is going to be, we don't know exactly what form this sort of basic idea is going to take, because we don't have the Instrumentum Laboris yet, but that's kind of the basics of what they'll talk about. And then the 10 study groups that are going to be on the outside of the Synod Hall and working into 2025 will handle the topics that actually we care about a lot, which will be, women in ministry, the whole question of sexuality, LGBTQI inclusion, and other matters that are more controversial. So inside the Synod Hall, they're going to talk about how to be a synodal church and mission. They're going to talk about unity and diversity, those two that sometimes cause tension. They want to talk about participation by all the baptized. They'll need concrete canonical configurations for practical implementation. How do we actually create canon law to make sure that lay people have the authority that they're going to need? Women will have the authority they're going to need. bishops will have the authority to share their authority. So all those things will be part of what they're going to talk about. And then I already said it's going to be on these 3 levels, and it'll be a process with, so this, as they say, you'll see, this has already started, and basically they already filled out and had to send their report. The local churches had to already send their report by May 15th. So, and all those reports are going to come together, to form the Instrumentum Laboris, which is this working document, which will be divided into three sections for the 3 weeks that they'll be there. And they also say in this in this document that there is no clear line of demarcation between what is discussed in the study groups and what is discussed in the Synod Hall at the second session. And I put a link here for anybody who wants to read this document. When you get this, I'll be putting this up on the Facebook page or on our website. But that's also an interesting thing to say. So while they're trying to make these divisions, I don't know how they can actually do that without talking about some of these issues. And so they're kind of giving themselves space, breathing room for there to be a messy process. And then the study groups outside the Synod Hall, so they're going to be organized by the Synod office. Basically, the Secretariat, Cardinal Gretsch and his group, Sister Natalie, and all those folks will be deciding who's going to be in the study groups, what they're going to actually do, what their questions will be. And they're going to do this in conjunction with the International Theological Commission, the Pontifical Biblical Commission, a canon law commission that was created specifically for the Synod, and then the dicasteries, including the dicastery for Doctrine of Faith. So it'll depend on what the dicastery is in charge of. If it's the bishops, if it's priest formation, they'll be involved in these study groups. And if it's ministry for women, the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith is going to have a big role to play in that. And hopefully that will turn out to be a pretty good selection because of the prefect, who's actually seems to be a pretty progressive fellow. They're going to discuss topics raised in the first session, but are supposedly going to be excluded from the second session. And they're not expected to conclude this work until at least June of 2025. The study groups will include bishops, experts, and then people from the dicasteries. So, and it says they're going to consider existing contributions. So hopefully, if we're talking about women deacons, they're going to be looking at those earlier reports, and then also active listening to what's being said. Then here are the 10 study groups. These are how they're divided, what they're going to be talking about. And some of these are not as important, I think, to us right now as we look at the work that we're about, but there are some very interesting things for us to pay attention to. And I've got those in red a little bit, but mostly 5 and 9 are what we're going to care about a lot. So the number 1, this group is going to study the relationship between the Eastern churches and the Latin Church, which needs to be done. There needs to be a lot more continuity and sharing and acceptance of diversity. The second group is going to talk about the poor. So, it's, what will come out of that is not clear. Third group is going to talk about the digital environment, how to carry out evangelization and so forth in a digital world. The fourth one is got to do with how priests are formed. So this sort of document that states how that's going to happen. They're going to talk about that, but that's going to be talked about in the context of a synodal church. How do we get priests formed from the very beginning to the end, and how to be synodal priests in a synodal church? And then number 5 is maybe the most important for us. This group is going to talk about some theological and canonical matters regarding specific ministerial forms. And so we know that under this heading, people will be talking about women deacons. They'll be talking about, expanding roles for other lay people. And likely this will be where and again, we're going to have to see the names of these people and what's actually going to happen has not been fully formed yet. So, but this is likely the group that we will interact with when it comes to the work that we're going to do in terms of expanding the lectionary. So we want to say to them, in all likelihood, here's one really important way for us to bring women forward in the church, which is to tell their stories. The sixth one is a revision in the synodal missionary perspective of documents, this relationship between the bishops and religious and then ecclesial associations. So it's, there's probably a lot of room for more working together, but as long as that allows for, as far as I'm concerned, religious women to keep their autonomy and their voice, which has been so vital for the life of the church. And then some aspects of the person and ministry of the bishop. So more about how the bishop functions, what happens during the ad limina visits, and all that within a synodal context. And the role of papal representatives, again, the folks, Cardinal Pierre in the United States, and I don't know who the folks all are in other places, but the role of what they will play in this synodal church. And then I think this is the one that really got a lot of, there was a lot of disappointment, but also a lot of hope at the October Synod, which is really this theological criteria and synodal methodologies for shared discernment of controversial doctrinal, pastoral, and ethical issues. So basically, we're going to talk about sexuality. We're going to talk about LGBTQI people. And within that context, there'll be, of course, that, discernment and probably strong polar opposites in terms of what that really means for the church. And so that'll be a very important group to follow as well. And then another group will be talking about ecumenical practices in the church. So study group 5, which I just pointed out, this is the group who's going to do the research on relationships between different forms of ecclesial ministry. So what does that mean? What is ordained to lay, but also, what other kind of ministries are possible? Which roles require ordination, which ones don't, the role of women in decision-making, leadership. And it actually says in this document that lays out the study groups, it is in this context that the question of women's possible access to the diaconate can be properly posed. To this group is entrusted the task to continue theological and pastoral research on the access of women to the diaconate. And this group will aim to respond to the Synod Assembly's desire for greater recognition and appreciation of the contribution of women and a growth of pastoral responsibility entrusted to them. So as you can see, over this group will be the Synod Office and the doctrine, the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. And this is really interesting because here it is right here in this document saying this is going to be studied, while Pope Francis sort of maybe preempted it or not. I mean, it just makes me wonder how this is going to work out in terms of, here it is in black and white. We're going to talk about women's access to the diaconate. With hanging over our heads is the Pope's quick, decision on what to say during a television interview. So that's going to be really interesting to watch. But I find it hopeful that it's here in black and white, and that we'll see who's in this group. But it'll be interesting to see how that gets carried forward. Study group 9 is going to study the anthropological categories that we have elaborated that are not sufficient to grasp the complexity of the elements that emerge from the experience or from knowledge of sciences. A long, wordy sentence that says, we don't know everything. We're admitting it. We don't know everything, and we really have to listen to the experiences of LGBTQI people and other people who are living sort of outside of those strict Catholic norms. And also we have to learn from science what all these processes, what all these sexualities are like, what they mean, and to hear that from science as well. So this is and this came out of the October document, but it's repeated in this study group document. So this is good that we're going to look for answers that and recognizing that the church doesn't have a good grasp on it yet. And then they're going to possibly reinterpret traditional categories of anthropology, soteriology, and theological ethics. That is fantastic to actually say that in a document leading up. So this is the people that will be overseeing this are, again, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, the International Theological Commission, with the general support of the Secretariat of the Synod. So so you can see here that the General Secretariat of the Synod is kind of with the support of, while they're very much more in positions of control. So this will be an interesting dialogue and an interesting group to watch. Other things that happened since the October meeting: 6 new consultors were appointed. This is generally very good news. Most of these consultors, I don't know the Monsignor, but everybody else has a very sort of Vatican II progressive theology. And so I think when they're added to this mix, this is good news for those of us who are looking for progressive changes in the church. Also, in the end of February, 200 priests went to Rome to consult regarding the synod. And I put that up there. They were from 89 countries. I think they wanted 300. It sounds like 200 showed up, but they were divided in these groups of 12 people each, and they had representatives from all the continents sitting in each group. And I just put down here the names of the priests who came from the US. And if anybody knows who came from their country, if Australia, if you know, Canadians, if there anybody else here from a different part of the world who may know who their priests are that went, these would be good. These are people that we should contact to let them know about our project. The more people that are in this process of change and looking forward, the more that we can make aware of this deficit in our lectionary and that there needs to be a change, the better off we are. And then another thing that's going to happen is the General Secretariat of the Synod is going to create a permanent forum on synodality. So basically, it's not clear yet what that's going to look like, but it's a group of people who are going to continue to work on the way synodality should work in the church. It's to deepen the theological, juridical, pastoral, spiritual, and communicative aspects of the church's synodality. That's also a very good thing if this notion of a synodal church is actually going to get rooted in a way that is lasting in our church. And then we know that Pope Francis said no in this interview to ordaining women as deacons. And we know that we've had this, I just named a few people who are, basically writing to ask for clarification or declaring this as a shortcoming of the Pope, which it is, to sort of undercut the process of synodality. And so I think it's going to be really interesting. I personally don't know how that can stick especially since it's in the documents. And so taking that off as a topic seems completely impossible to me in a way. So everybody else has different opinions, but I have a feeling that we're going to see some kind of a shift in that. And then the USCCB. So part of this, one of the things that happened this time around was instead of having these large synodal meetings, the bishops got together with a group of people and they wrote up a document. And so I went through the document and just brought out some highlights. This document will be put together with all the other documents that come from other bishops' conference and the people that they had that got together with them. And that will form the basis for the Instrumentum Laboris, the working document for the participants at the October meeting. So they talk about things like safe harbor and fiery communion. They're in the document, they portray them as polarity. So, and they also, I think unfairly, bring fiery communion that it's equated with prophetic truth as the church's truth, which I think is not true, but that's in the document. But and some people were saying leadership needs to be clear about the truth. There's confusion because of some of the things that have gone forward. Again, those are people who are talking that in my mind is not at all the case, but that's what's in the document. Also in the document, it says we need stronger catechesis formation and stronger formation in Catholic social teaching. And there needs to be more opportunities for women to hold leadership roles in parishes, dioceses, schools, and organizations. They need to restore old forms and introduce new forms of ministry. And Sister Donna, who is Bishop Tobin's, I think she's the chancellor in his diocese. I can just see her saying, yeah, we need to restore women in the diaconate. It's an old form. So I think, you'll see in this list, I think there were some good people who helped form this document, helped develop it. And I think you can see some of them popping up. Young people want to find new expressions of faith. And this is definitely the Catholic social teaching people saying there's division around Catholic social teaching. And the church has allowed ongoing polarizations and conflict leading to the denial of the church's social magisterium. So and I think there's a lot of truth to that. Especially the US bishops have really sort of propped up the most conservative sides of the church, and the people who think Catholic social teaching is communism or socialism or whatever other word they think is nasty to attach to it, that this has been allowed to go on much too long. And so the people who were there, who are very much in favor of making Catholic social teaching more central to our ongoing formation, said that. And they talked about things like complacency, clericalism, clergy sex abuse, authentic belonging, and basically also spoke about the tension between the welcoming spirit and articulating church teaching. So we're going to see that play out over and over again. People who want to hold firm to these, like church law is a block of concrete, and those who say, like us, who say the church needs to be welcoming. And so I did post the document here so that if you want to read it, you are welcome to do that. And I want you to see who developed this USCCB interim report, because when I first read through it, I thought, oh, this is a bit disappointing, and it is to some degree. But when I look at the team, the people who are on the team, some of these folks are very outstanding. And so in terms of wanting to press the church forward, to be more progressive. And so Alexander Carroll, Julia McStravog, I think Richard Cole's a pretty, I'm sure he seems middle of the ground, but he's a forward-thinking person. I think some of these bishops are forward-thinking. The writing team, again, they had some of the same people, but they also had Father Ivan, who I think is fairly progressive thinking. Leticia Salazar has said good things about women in the church. And then other people who are working groups are listed here. So the people who worked on the part about participation and talked about, so you see Sister Donna here. And so, I think when I look at the people who are involved, I feel somewhat hopeful, because I think many of these folks are Vatican II at the very least, and want to really push forward on a lot of these issues. There's a social justice group. So when you hear people you see Kim Daniels from Georgetown was there. When you hear people complaining that the Catholic leaders are not making Catholic social teaching central enough to lay formation, priest formation, all formation, that those are the people that were putting that forward. And then there was a group that was talking about vocations, and and you see Kristen Kohlberg was there. We know she's very friendly. She gave a presentation for Future Church a while back, and she's one of the consultors for the in October. And so she's one of the people saying, you know, we have to revamp our seminary formation so that we actually have priests who are willing to be partners in this synodal church with others, and not little baby kings and kings. So the next part I want to talk about is the paths for advocacy. So in this, as Mary Magdalene advocates, here is the kind of things that are happening. Some of this is ongoing right now. Some of it's, you know, we've done a lot of work already, but we're outreach to key members of the Synod, so Vatican officials, USCCB, bishops, and the study groups. So when we find out who's in the study groups, we'll also send them, especially the groups that are directly involved with what we care about. We'll be sending them the educational packet, and I'm going to show you, I have it, I have put that out there. I want to show you tonight where it is exactly. We have these letters that we've written to the key players, phone calls to key players, in-person appointments. Some of this will be what some of you may want to do as we go forward and follow up with, after we send these packages out. Some have already gone out. Letters to the editor. We have a sample letter to the editor, a sample op-ed piece for those who want to put something in their local Catholic paper or local paper. I have a sample bulletin inserts. If you happen to be in a parish that would be open to, you know, learning about this project and learning about the need to expand the lectionary. We have something there for you to send to your priest or whoever takes care of your bulletin. Then we're going to have social media campaigns. We have a person who Russ has hired and created a little short video clip, which is really cute. And so it's not quite finished yet, but that'll be going out as part of our social media campaign to kind of get the energy up, get people's interest up and imaginations going. And then we also have, you know, resources for outreach and education in your local community. So, you know, you can use our packets as guides for dialogue and discernment about this question. And these questions that we asked you at one point are really good questions to ask in your local community or to talk about with your priest. It gives you a chance, or your bishop, it gives you a chance to ask them their experience and to tell them your experience of the lectionary. So, you know, what is your experience of the lectionary? How has it strengthened your faith? Where has it caused doubts or concerns? And what are your hopes for the lectionary? So these are really good starting questions if you sit down with anybody, whether it's another Catholic from your parish or community, and just begin to talk about the lectionary in very personal terms. What does it mean when we hear those stories? And then we're also going to have some key events in Rome. Russ will be there, and some other folks will probably be going. And that plan is not completely made yet, but we have some ideas, so we will keep you informed on that. So right now we have been developing the list of participants, consultors, the USCCB Committee on Liturgy or on Divine Worship, people at the head of dicasteries. So we have addresses, a lot of emails, and what we've been doing is wherever we can, and that's most of them, we're sending out by email first a cover letter, and I'll show you what's in that, a packet, and you can see by going to this link exactly what's in the packet, the proposal packet. It has a bit about why we're doing the work, what the Synod has to say about this, who are some of the women that are missing, and and then some academic resources also will go with that packet. And we've developed them in English, Spanish, French, and Italian, so that those, who don't have English as maybe not as a first language, that they can we also have that in other languages to send out. And then this is just a little bit of the letter. So I just want you to see what all these people are getting basically. Now it gets modified a little bit depending on who they are. If it's a bishop, if it's a cardinal, if it's somebody at the Synod office, if it's a USCCB member, we modify it a little bit. But this is basically what we're asking them. And basically we're using the Synod text to shore this work up. And then we talk about, if you go to, as the faithful work together to bring forth a synodal church, we hope renewed dialogue and discernment will lead to an expansion of the lectionary, especially the Sunday lectionary, so that the inspiring stories of our foremothers in faith will be better represented and proclaimed to all Catholics. So as a participant in this vitally important synodal process, we're asking you to do these three things: review this scholarship, review the packet, dialogue with other Synod participants about the idea of the gifts of our foremothers and the way we can improve the lectionary to include more of their stories. The people that go, that'll be at the Synod, there are, coffee breaks, lunch, in the evening getting together. There are many times during the Synod that these can be brought up informally, and there may be times, we'll be watching, when they can be brought up formally and then talked about. So we'll see, but everybody we reach out to will have their, learn a little bit more, will have their understanding of the lectionary improved, and they'll become more aware of these women gaps in the lectionary. And then we're going to ask them to recommend some kind of action be taken to make the lectionary more inclusive, so that all Catholics, but especially women and girls, will see themselves more clearly in the life, faith, leadership, and ministry of the Church. And they'll be inspired to be ministers of the gospel for the world today. So we want them to explore the possibility of a supplemental lectionary or some other interim path until an examination of the entire lectionary can be taken up, which we know moves at a snail's pace in the Catholic Church. But just so you know, I did send this to the executive secretary of the USCCB Committee for Divine Worship. And he said to me that basically they will look at this proposal, and that they actually can, they say, while these things come down from Rome, we actually can ask for modifications. So I thought that was a good response from somebody at the executive secretary of the USCCB Lectionary Committee. And then we have included these support statements from the Synod synthesis, a short list of these prominent omissions, our requests, and academic resources. And then we also give them a chance to just look at this online. So I've got a page specifically dedicated just to that. So for all of you, so what I have done is I've created all the forms that we're going to need on this page. And again, you'll have all this when I send this out to you again. So basically, and I'll show you what's on that page, but those are the forms you're going to need if you want to start a conversation, if you want to lead a conversation in your community, if you want to talk to your bishop, if you want to follow up on something that was already sent to them, if you want to write an op-ed, if you want to write a letter to the editor, if you want to send a bulletin notice out, you'll have the resources all on this page. And so the other thing that I talked about in the beginning, so if you are willing to help reach out to these Synod participants or the USCCB committee members who will be making some of these decisions and recommendations, I would like you to write to me here, or you could also put it in the chat tonight, and we'll save the chat, with your name, your diocese, and your willingness to reach out to, if you want to reach out, if you think you can reach out to one person, if you can reach out to 3 people, whatever you think you can do, that would be wonderful. And I will just work with you personally on the resources you'll need and I'll go over with you, like, I'm not going to give you the worst possible person to reach out to. I would say, here are some names. Are you comfortable reaching out to this person? Are you not? And so you'll need to be honest with me. And, but really, I'm not going to just reach out to you. Because I don't want to put that pressure on anybody, but for you to reach out to me if you are willing to do that. There are other ways that you can bring this project forward. You can do your part and just send out the petition or the open letter, we're calling it, to more people. But I think this one-on-one contact is really going to be quite effective for us as we go. When people, bishops, and other people see the goodness of the project, for me, it's like a no-brainer, but it's a very good project. It doesn't involve really any thorny questions that anybody, it's like a natural yes. And I think we're going to have a lot of success with it as long as we can raise awareness about it. And then I also have a form that I'm going to send to you that basically, so if you contact somebody, you talk to this, synod member, or you talk and they say, oh yeah, we're going to ask them, will you please try to bring this up, whether formally, at the meeting or informally, can you talk to other people about it? And they say yes to that. You can write that into this report form, and we're tracking everything. We're going to I'm tracking when I send an email out. I'm tracking when I get a response. I'm tracking when I send because I'm going to be sending also, postal packages to some people, not everybody, so that they have them in hand. For instance, James Martin, the Jesuit, has said he's willing to do this for us, and I'm going to send a packet to him so he's got it in hand. So he's willing to talk about it, and he's also advising us to make sure we find out who's in the study groups that can affect change there as well. So here's the page that I told you is for all of you. It has, I just took a snapshot of it so you can see. So you have a sample letter. If you want to send it to somebody, all these are in a form where you can modify them. So you don't have to, these are just samples. If you want to add something of your own personal experience, that's all the better. And then there's the packet that has, all the information about, why we're doing it, what the Synod says, who the women are. And then there's the academic resources, so you can send them something by Ruth Fox or Regina Bosclair. There have been a number of people who have written about this, and so I think it's important, especially for some people, to have those academic resources as backup, understanding who has noticed this problem and what we can do about it. And then I have a sample follow-up letter. So if I'm in talking to you, I say, yes, I sent that person an email. I sent them a postal packet, a paper packet. Then you could use the follow-up letter, modifying it and saying, and then to whatever extent you can, if you can get somebody on the phone to talk with them or get a personal meeting, even better, because the more they see people are interested in this, real Catholics are interested in it, the more they'll get behind it. And again, I have these sample letters to the editor, op-ed, bulletin inserts. And this is the form that you would fill out if you reach out to somebody. So I'm asking for your name, your email, and then who you contacted, the date, and then what kind of response you got. And it's okay if you got he slammed the phone down, she slammed the phone down, or whatever. Doesn't matter. Just we're going to track all that, and it helps us understand who our allies are, who we, I think, we know that the best people to reach out right now to are people who are natural allies or people who are unaware and would be allies if they knew. So if we can get all those people talking about that, that would be, maybe half the group, at least, that would be a real step forward. And then what's next? So we're going to meet again in August, the 6th, which is a Tuesday, because in the meantime, from this meeting to the next, the Instrumentum Laboris is going to come out. And we're going to look at that and see what's in it, see again how it shapes the work that we're doing. And then hopefully, I'm hoping that the study groups will have a sense of who those folks are, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. They're supposed to have a report. All these groups are supposed to have a report ready for the October Synod. So it can't be too long until they get formed and people. But it's, again, the church is not always very transparent with these things, but we have insiders who I think will help us find these things out as we go along. So here's the next training session. And again, this last slide is just all the pages on the website that help us to if you want to go to them. And the Missing Women is a very good chart that Rita started for us and we finished up. It's really nice because it tells you exactly, you read through the Ruth Fox article or Regina Beauclerc, but you never have a chart that just says this person we never hear from, no matter what day of the year it is. This person we never hear on a Sunday, and so it really kind of lays out some of those prominent omissions, and that's a very good thing for people to see. So I think that's it, Russ, for me right now. So I think right now we can go into questions, any questions that you have. Also, if you think you're ready to talk to somebody and you're happy to do that, just let me know. And again, I will work with you one-on-one so that you are comfortable with the person you're going to reach out to or people that you're going to reach out to. I recognize that sometimes this can be a little, people are reticent to do that. It's the bishop. The bishops are just like us. And so just to reach out to them and talk, or other people. So people will work with you on who it is that you are comfortable talking with. So did I see a hand or not? Let's see here. Trying to look at the list. Okay, Clara.
Clara.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, go ahead, Russ, if you want to moderate that.
Okay. Have you all seen the document that came out entitled the Bishop of Rome?
No, where, what?
It's an excellent document. It's a Vatican thing. I can give you the link to it. And it talks about, it's made for ecumenical dialogue.
Oh.
Mostly. But the interesting thing is it has responses of our Protestant brothers and sisters and our Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters.
Oh.
Encouraging us to, you got to get your act together, guys. If we want to get together with you, here are the things that we want to see. I mean, it is precious. And so I can send that to you, Deb. And
that would be
I was amazed at it, and it wasn't highly, I mean, it was really honest. And I think this is part of the issues that Pope Francis has, because I think he's got Christian unity at the sort of part of the top of his list. Yeah. And so the deacon women thing, kind of is a stumbling block to some of these folks. So he want to, get into, well, we're going to ordain women and screw up the dialogues that we're having. I think there's more behind the scenes than, appears for us. So
I absolutely agree with that. So I don't have the document.
I got to send you a link.
Yeah. Oh, you got the link? Okay. Because I just, oh, you did? Okay. Created this document. Okay.
I have to look it up.
Yeah. Anyway, this is an analysis of the document. Oh, okay. Well, that's really great news, because that also, I'll probably bring a little bit of that into the next meeting that we have, just so we can see what pieces of that might be useful for us as we go forward.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
because it's good to know those things, honestly. Yeah.
I was just totally surprised.
Yeah. And I mean, and this is very good dialogue material when you're talking to somebody else in the church, you know, if you're talking to a priest or bishop, do you know? And so here's, you know.
And
So
they all of them say we need to be more synodal. All of them.
yeah.
I mean, whether the Presbyterians and have their annual conference meeting, or it's the Eastern Church that does their synod, you know, they're basically saying, you Catholics are dragging your feet, you're behind the times, you know, can't operate this way and expect to operate in the Christian milieu.
Yeah, absolutely. Fabulous. Thank you for letting us know about that. I had missed that one. Other questions? Rita, do you have your hand raised?
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Rita, unmute yourself. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. This is first place. This is just great, Deb. Thank you. Very invigorating and lovely to see so many wonderful faces here.
Yeah.
I have been doing some more thinking. I'll obviously talk to you about this, but in terms of preparing people for going to the meetings, I'd be happy to talk one-on-one. I'm sure, I shouldn't say offer for you, but you know, I think there's sort of a communal kind of spirit we could help create too, to prepare each other to go forward. And as I went through the material for the last session we had on the social invisibility of women, I ended up at the end of that making a list of, here are like 6 things that can be done with almost no discussion, like no problem. You know, put Mary Magdalene on Sunday, put Miriam at the Easter Vigil, give Phoebe a feast and just put her back on a Saturday. You know, make the prophetic anointing woman in Mark mandatory, not optional. You know, and there's some very significant teachings that can come out of these, and that could be done really with the signature, not with, you know, bringing theological commissions together or anything. So I wanted to put that out there and hear, you know, what people, if that makes you feel even more confident, like that we can get something done that would be really meaningful. So thanks.
Excellent. Joe, you have your hand up?
Yes, I wanted to pick up on what Clara was saying about the ecumenical aspect of the lectionary. It strikes me that the common lectionary is a real gift that we experience because so many other denominations are also reading the same readings. Of course, they have the same problems with their lectionary, whether they're recognizing them or acknowledging them or not. So that's something that I think is really worth considering when if we look at changing the lectionary, what are we going to do to that ecumenical thing? And then the kind of a related thing, I'm wondering what the Southern Church, the Third World Church, you know, where they are on this. It seems that there might be a tendency for us here in North America, although kudos to our down under friend this evening and so on, but there might be a tendency for us to be, okay, we're going with this, and wondering, is the larger church coming along?
Yeah. Rita, you know a little bit about lectionaries in other countries. I mean, we know that Canada has a different lectionary than we do, and it's more progressive than we do. But I don't know, Rita, what your bounty of knowledge is on that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So again, after or in the course of doing the Women Missing class, I asked around, called an Episcopalian friend or two, and Lutheran. And I discovered that the Evangelical Lutheran Church, the Episcopalian, the Anglican have all changed the Mary Magdalene reading, have added her on Sunday, Easter Sunday, and have added Miriam to the Easter Vigil. And then they've made a few other minor changes, but none of them have really unearthed, as one of my friends who's on the path to becoming an Episcopalian priest said, it's marginally better. So yeah, but I don't think it would be, first a little ground setting here. When the Catholic lectionary was released in 6970, the other denominations looked at it and they adopted it like on their own. It wasn't like something that was worked on together. So there wasn't any expectation that this would always be modified in lockstep. And I do think, considering the more progressive, woman pastors in these other denominations, that these changes would be welcome. Of course, dialogue is important on it, but they're not radical changes. We're not, until you really dig into it. So that's just a little level set on it. But yeah, thanks, Deb. And
Yeah,
thanks for that
is,
observation, Joe.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, I mean, honestly, the Episcopal Church, I mean, for one, really needs to have a renewal of their whole liturgical life, because they're still, their language is very patriarchal. And so, we're not the only ones struggling with patriarchal language for sure, but, and patriarchal stories. But anyway, other questions before we, let you go, because I plan on hopefully reaching out to whoever will send me a text. Okay, Donna, you're asking a question here. Let's see. Okay, Russ can answer the Mary Magdalene feast day question. We do have a liturgy for Mary Magdalene's feast day. We do every year. So Russ, I don't know.
Yeah, we do have a Mary Magdalene feast day celebration scheduled for July 22nd. We also have that download available for people. So if you go to, I'll put it in the chat, but if you go to futurechurch.org/Mary Magdalene, let me just grab that real quick for you.
Could I also add, oh, sorry.
You'll be able to download all kinds of resources. So our celebration for this year is Women Witnessing to the Risen Christ, which invites people to invite contemporary women who are witnessing to the risen Christ in their communities. But that link, if you go to the downloads for all the Mary Magdalene celebrations, go back to the early 2000s, and there is a celebration there on the hidden women of the lectionary. It's the women excluded from the lectionary. So that one does exist there. We have one on celebrating Catholic women. So it runs the gamut. So we'd invite you to use whichever celebration makes sense for your community at this time in your community's context. And I do not know anything about the Phoebe liturgies. I do know that Discerning Deacons has a toolkit available similar to our Mary Magdalene celebration. So if you go to discerningdeacons.org, you'll be able to download a Phoebe celebration there.
Russ, before we close out, you're at the AUSCP meeting, which for any of you who don't know, so there's a group of Vatican II priests, and they have formed an association it's more than a decade old now, called the Association of U.S. Catholic Priests, and Russ is there. Future Church goes every year. And so, and some of you may or may not know that they actually wrote kind of an open letter to Pope Francis asking him what this no meant in the context of the synodal process, what this no meant. And so they asked really good questions. And if I could find that, but anyway, I just wondered if you heard any talk about it, Russ, or if they're discussing this at all, or what's your sense about synodality in general and the AUSCP and what's happening?
Yeah, so they did talk about that. They have not received a response yet from Pope Francis, but they promised that if they do hear from Pope Francis or anyone, they will reach out to the AUSCP membership. And I'm on that email list, so I would get it. I think there's a very strong support for synodality here at the AUSCP. One of the presenters today, Tom Reese, who's a Jesuit priest, sort of talked about kind of what you talked about, Deb, how for Pope Francis, this phase of the synod is really going to be concentrating on process. I think the analogy that Tom used was, for Pope Francis, this is about the journey and not the destination. And I think there's a lot of mixed feelings about that here at the AUSCP. A lot of the guys understand that, and they understand that we need a culture change here in the church.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also very impatient for changes to happen, simple changes like women deacons. And I know at my table, I expressed a concern that it could be a beautiful journey, but what if no one's taking it with Pope Francis?
Yeah.
And my concern is that a culture change takes a long time, and we are losing women and young women at record rates, and they are taking their children with them, and who can blame them? And so we need some radical changes, big changes, and quickly. I think that seems to be the vibe around here. I got a lot of support in that statement at my table when I was sharing about that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Tom did point out, which I did not hear previously in quite this way, is he said there was no meaningful participation in the synod by parish or diocesan priests, that bishops were there, lay women were there, but there weren't a whole lot of parish priests there. And so he applauded the retreat that Pope Francis led with them, and really thinks it was an oversight. And I think that at least the AUSCP priests would have been a benefit if a couple of them had been at the synod, speaking from their perspective.
Yeah, very good.
I'll just say that I've also reached out to a few people who are involved with the synod and who are over in Rome for their take, basically asking the same kinds of questions that the AUSCP asked of Pope Francis. What does this mean for that working group on theological and pastoral questions related to various forms of ministry? And I have not, unfortunately, heard back. I think people are still trying to make sense of it themselves. I will say that I did talk to Cynthia Bailey-Mans, who is one of the U.S. Synod delegates, and she told me that she is proceeding as if the conversation is still on the table, and will still be making sure that that conversation is at least a part of her table discussions. She's going to be leading a listening session on July 2nd with Future Church.
Yeah.
And she told me that she would address that a little bit with everyone who comes to that listening session. And would love to hear from people specifically about their reaction to Pope Francis's interview. And she will take those stories with her to Rome when she goes in October. So
great. Oh, that'll be fantastic. Yeah, I'm signed up.
Could I just,
I see you wanted to get in.
Yeah. Could I add, we also have the exciting Stations of the Resurrection art tour. Is going to be July 30th. And for all, for anyone, we're creating postcards for each of the stations. These are just samples. And on the back, there's a little explanation of the theology that's revealed by this image. And if an image is of a scene that's never on a Sunday, that's noted on the back. Also, some really important information, such as Mary Magdalene was sent to the brothers and sisters. She was never sent to apostles. And in fact, in John's gospel, there is no such group. There's no exclusive group of apostles. So it's going to be the first experiment I did was a little bit too theological, got a little too deep in the weeds. I've learned that lesson, and anyhow, it's going to be really cool. And the images have just come out beautifully. So people who sign up to go and see in person, I will commit, I'll mail these to you if you want, and you can leave them as your calling card. And they're set up so you can, write a little note on the back. And they have the QR codes to the future church, to all of this, the Synod material, and the open letter. So it's really exciting. And I want to thank Russ for putting that together and Laura James, the artist, is going to be there. Yeah, so it's really, so July 30th, our normal 7 to 8, if you can, and spread the word, because no one's ever, as far as I can tell, this has never been created, the Stations of the Resurrection. It's every verse of John 20, verses 1 to 29. We didn't do the coda. This is written that you may believe. Anyhow, it's enough said, but it's exciting material you can hand to people, they can really sit and look at it and say, oh, wow, that scene is never read on a Sunday. Is that a problem? So
yeah, very good. Well, I think we can let everyone go. If it's 8:15 almost, so I don't know, Russ, if you want to lead us out of this. But we'll be sending out these materials again tomorrow, and so you'll have them in hand. And again, if you want to write to me, emerita@futurechurch.org, and volunteer to do some outreach, we would just love that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Deb, for putting this presentation together and all your work. For those of you who don't have access to my email, I get copies of all of the emails that Deb has been writing to all the Synod delegates, to the bishops, to the folks at the Synod Secretariat. And it's just a joy to see those emails going out one by one as Deb does this initial outreach to everyone. So thank you, Deb, for what you're doing.
Glad to do it.